Welcome in everyone to another edition of the GSMC College Football Podcast brought to you by the GSMC Sports Network. We have a great show for you today. First, we're going to start off with a report from Dennis Dodd that showed some attendance, some things that are happening with attendance. Excuse me, I had a little brain fart there. But yeah, some attendance numbers that we'll get into that are fairly promising for the sport. Then we'll jump into a little bit of a college football State of the Union. We had the actual State of the Union last week, so I thought I'd piggyback off of that and kind of give everyone a one-stop shop for all of the changes that are coming this season and some of the changes that could be coming down the barrel this week. And then we'll jump back into our 2025 recruiting update. This time we will jump to the defensive side of the ball. Some incredible players in this class, so we will jump into all of those guys. And then it's Top 10 Tuesday, and today we're going to go through the top head coaches in college football in my mind. I'm sure there will be a lot of different perspectives on this. I've seen probably 10 different lists, and none of them have been the same. So I'm sure this will be one that I will get a number of comments about me being wrong about, but I'm more than fine with that. So, but before we jump into the show, I want to remind you all we get a ton of comments and questions throughout the show, and the best way for you all to see your questions on the screen is to use the link at the bottom of the screen, gsmcpodcast.net. It's a huge help not only to us here at the network, but to you all to see your questions or comments on the screen, and we can have a fun back and forth. I can give you a nice little shout out. But let's jump right in. College football has been absolutely off the walls lately. I don't think anyone needs to be told that, but it seems like it's still heading in a good direction, at least in terms of fan attendance. We had a new report come out of the numbers of average fan attendance across the country this past year, and it was up from a year ago, although it was up from 41,840 fans in 2022 to 4,867 fans this last season. So only about 27 fan increase there, but I'll take any increase I can get of more fans in the stadium, so not mad at that at all. I think this is something that a lot of fans were worried about, obviously, with a lot of things changing and a lot of fans not being as enthused about the new direction of college football. There was always that worry that fans weren't going to want to go to the games. Fans were going to kind of tap out of college football, and whether it was watch different sports like watch the NFL or whatever it was, they just weren't enthused about the way college football was going. And there was a worry there for a long time among a lot of people, including myself, that at that would come the expense of great atmospheres that we love so much in college football. And it seems like, as at least for right now, we are still on the right direction. This is the first time since 2008 that they've had back-to-back seasons that have increased the average fans. And I think some of that has to do with the pandemic, obviously. I think people are still really enjoying those moments they get to go see their team, because there were a number of weeks and a year at least where fans were essentially not allowed to see their teams that they love so much, and even season ticket holders were kept out for a certain amount of time during the pandemic. And I think there are people that are coming back into the sport that just want to be around it again and want to be in those stadiums, because as we all know, those are the real remarkable parts of the sport, is everything that happens in those stadiums on Saturdays. So 2023 was the top attendance in college football since 2017, which is huge. I think this is the first time since 2008, as I said, where it's risen in back-to-back years, which is pretty remarkable. And all of the kind of deterioration of this kind of started in 2014, where the average fans was roughly around 44,000, 44,500 roughly, and has steadily dropped until the past 2 years. So there was definitely a period of time, whether it was people not being enthused by the new playoff, people not being as into their teams. I don't know, maybe some of the powerhouses like Texas and USC not being as good definitely probably didn't help that number. But at the end of the day, we are finally back on the good side of things, starting to see some rises in attendance, which is absolutely huge. And I think this is something that hopefully we can garner into next year and beyond, because obviously there are a ton of changes coming, which we will get into in the second segment here. But there's a ton of things that are going to be changing next year and going forward in the sport. And I think with all of these new changes, there are going to be some people that decide whether it's giving up their season tickets or just not buying that game that they probably would have bought a couple of years ago. There's definitely those opportunities or those chances for that to happen. But at the end of the day, this is a good sign, and I'll take any good sign for college football I can get as of right now. So very excited about this. I think this is something that is going to really energize fans. I think every fan, loves seeing more and more fans in the stadium. So seeing this continue to uptick, even with all of the turmoil going on around college football, I think it's a great thing. In 2022, actually, the year before this, was the second biggest increase in the 40-year history of keeping the stats. So around 2,000 fan increase in 2022. So there's a ton to be excited about. I think the pandemic helped a lot with those numbers. Obviously, people have been trapped inside for a long time and missing college football, missing those atmospheres. So it's not crazy to think that once the pandemic let up, that people would be chomping at the bit to get back to their teams. But let's get into some of the details about this and what conferences, what teams kind of pulled the most weight. The Pac-12 and the Sun Belt had absolutely huge boosts to their attendance. Pac-12 went up to 9.7% this past year, which makes a ton of sense. It being its last year, the last time you'll see a lot of the matchups in that conference. So not crazy to me that they had the boost they did. Obviously, Deion coming to Colorado helps that a ton as well. And then Sun Belt went up 8.67% and had the highest attendance average ever for them. So that's a huge boost for the group of five, where you kind of need, for the group of five going forward, I tend to believe at least, you need that leader in the clubhouse. The same way that the Power Five for a long time, and now it's kind of started to work against them a little bit, but the Power Two at the top of the Power Five was for a long time the SEC and the Big Ten, and I think that kind of helped the Power Five be this incredible product week in and week out and have everyone tuned in every week. So I think having someone like the Sun Belt or the MAC or whoever it is, Conference USA, there's a ton of group of five conferences that could step up into that role. But right now, it looks like the Sun Belt is on the right path, and I hope that they can hold on to some of their teams through the next craziness of conference realignment, and they can continue that trend, because it's a very, very fun conference to watch, and it gives legitimacy to the group of five where they absolutely deserve it. So one place where the group of five did not do too well was the American Athletic Conference, which makes total sense. Losing Cincinnati, UCF, and Houston to the Big 12 was never going to be an easy thing to overcome. But they had a big drop-off. They went down 14.7% this past year. Obviously, UCF is a huge draw with the massive alumni pool and student pool that they have. Houston, obviously a huge school, and then Cincinnati coming off some pretty remarkable years with Luke Fickell, had a ton of fans. So obviously it was going to be a steep drop-off, but the Americans definitely going to have to hopefully get their act in order a little bit better this upcoming year and get back to normalcy a little bit, hopefully. But for some of the teams that really stuck out this year, Florida State, I think, obviously makes a ton of sense. Had a huge bump of about 11,000 and a half fans from the previous year, and it makes total sense. All the fans wanted to come out to see this historic season that they just had, and now the question is, can they follow it up? Because these fans will be back next year, I promise you that. They're going to be very excited about the Mike Norvell era and being back a part of that national conversation, but you got to follow it up. So it'll be interesting to see if Florida State can continue to build off the massive boost they got from a year ago. I talked about them earlier, but Colorado was the big winner, obviously, with Deion coming to town and all of the excitement around a program that was coming off a 1-11 season, it was pretty easy to get fans in the seats, but he did it incredibly well. They had an attendance up 30% from the 2022 season, so a totally different crowd, a totally different atmosphere, and I think that will only build this year with a better team, a more experienced team, and hopefully more wins for Buffalo fans. So very excited to see what they can do going forward. And then Michigan, the king of the land, as it were, for attendance records, and it makes total sense. But highest team for the 9th straight year and 26th out of the last 27 seasons. Makes sense. You have the biggest stadium in all of North America. You have one of the biggest alumni bases and fan bases in all of college football. So if Michigan wasn't up at the top, I'd be a little bit nervous. But then the ACC and the SEC actually posted their highest attendance average since 2016. SEC leading all the conferences in average attendance, which makes total sense. The SEC fans are something different. In fact, the SEC average was higher than all of the Group of Five averages combined, which is just gives you an idea of the gap between the big conferences and everyone else, particularly the SEC and the Big Ten. The SEC and the Big Ten, in fact, had the top 13 teams in attendance, in average attendance this year. That does include Texas and Oklahoma going over to the SEC and the new teams in the Big Ten. So a little bit different in terms of what it was last year, but going forward, the what you can expect, they did have the top 13 teams. So the strong keep getting stronger. They keep getting bigger and more powerful. So it'll be very interesting to see how all that works. Overall, I think this is a great thing for the sport. I think any time you can get more fans in the stadium, get that atmosphere even more juiced up than it already is, I think it's a great thing for the game. I don't think there's any argument from really anyone there. I think the one big worry here is, as we went through all of that data, there were some great moments for the Group of Five teams. The ACC is starting to boost up, but as we've talked about a lot, the ACC could be looking a lot different come even July of this year. So there is somewhat of a worry that the SEC and the Big Ten being so successful in these metrics, in TV ratings, in money brought into the sport, and all of the things that the powers that be really care about, where I tend to believe they should care about other things, but that's a totally different conversation. I think they officially have incredible amount of data marks and points to make their case that they deserve a bigger piece of the pie, whether that's in the playoff or whether that's entirely breaking off and becoming their own entity altogether. So I think there is a lot of worry around college football about all of this. There is a lot of worry on my side about all of this, but at least for right now, it seems like we're heading in the right direction. I'm going to take the good news and kind of leave the possible consequences to the side for right now. I think it's possible that a lot of the trends we see might be, I don't want to say fugazi or fake or anything like that, but I do think this upcoming season will be the real moniker of, are the people that are less than enthused about the future of college football going to stick around? Because the last 2 years they've had big reasons to come out, whether it was getting over the pandemic, wanting to be outside, wanting to be back at those games. And then this year you had the Pac-12 dissolving after a year. You had the Big 12 with the last year of Texas and Oklahoma. You had the SEC with the last year without, all these new teams. So you had a lot of outside factors pushing you towards games the last couple of years. And now you have all the new stuff that's coming in 2024. So it'll be interesting to see if fans are really excited to see these new matchups, like Colorado playing Texas Tech or Texas playing Georgia, or all these incredible matchups that we are going to get, or will fans of maybe some older fans, or even younger fans in some senses, will they miss the classic battles that they used to have against the same teams every year, and the teams that they have neighbors that are fans of? And I think there's definitely two different factions in this. I think there's a lot to be figured out over the next little bit, and it'll definitely make decisions for a lot of the people that are currently on the fence about what their future with college football looks like as a fan. But at the end of the day, the attendance numbers rose last year. I'm hoping they will continue to rise with all of the interesting new matchups that we're going to see and all of that type of stuff. But I'm going to wait until 2024 ends to get those numbers to really get an idea of, are we okay for the future, or is this just kind of a blip in everyone trying to get their last glimpse of college football as they knew it before it changes into something totally different. So it'll be interesting to see how all of that develops. Still a ton to figure out going into this season, but it's going to be a different season. So it'll be interesting to see how the fans react to that. But that'll do it for this segment. We are going to take a short break here, and then when we come back, we're going to do a little bit of a roundup of where we're at in college football, all of the coaching changes, playoff changes, conference realignment, everything that I could think of in the moment. We're going to try to get you up to date on everything coming in 2024, and then the possible changes that could be coming after 2024 and 2025, because there are a whole lot of them. But stick with us, and we will be right back.
I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I wanna be the greatest. Everybody on the face shit. I look around and feel like everybody is the fakest. I make this every day and I'm impatient. Hoping one day I blow up from the basement. Statement, the top is so vacant. I don't hear shit that I think is amazing. Waiting for my day when I'm playing. Sold out shows for 1,000 faces. Hey, give me that crown. Get in my way and to be put down. It ain't your place, all this my town. If I want that shit, then I'll get it right now. I'm losing it, the noose, if it's some losing shit, a stupid myth. You choose to live or choose to dip. You choose to fight or lose your grip and lose your gift. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind?
Alrighty, welcome back everyone. We just talked about some of the changes in attendance records in college football. There has still been a little bit of an uptake in attendance even with all of the changes going on, but 2024 seems to be the one that will tell the tale on that one. But let's jump into my version of a State of the Union. College football is under a crazy amount of changes right now. There is a ton of stuff going all over the place. And 2024 is the year where a lot of that stuff takes hold on college football. A lot of the stuff that we have been somewhat dreading for some of us, some looking very much forward to it, but a lot of stuff is happening this year, and a lot of stuff is going to be happening this week. So I figured let's update you all on where we are now, and then we'll get to the craziness as it kind of unfolds over the next week or so. But right now, there's a ton of stuff happening. We have conference realignment, coaching changes that are absolutely huge, playoff changes coming, rule changes, transfers, everything that you could possibly think of that could be changing about the sport, is changing about this sport. So it'll be interesting to see how all of this kind of affects the fan bases, affects the attendance records that we just talked about. But for right now, let's just break it down. Let's go nuts and bolts, give everyone kind of a one-stop shop to get updated on everything happening in 2024, and then we'll worry about 2025, 6, 7, all of the craziness that could happen down the road a little bit later. But for right now, let's start in conference realignment. I know there are a ton of teams moving a ton of different places, and I feel like I've said it a lot, but I think there are still some people that are very confused about what is going on, and that makes total sense. So let's just break down where everyone's going and kind of the implications of all of this. So Texas and OU, as we have known for a couple of years now, are heading to the SEC this year. A huge addition, obviously, for the SEC. Anytime you can add teams like Texas and Oklahoma and brands like Texas and Oklahoma, it's an absolute win. For the Big 12, they had to replace some teams. They did add UCF, Cincy, Houston, and BYU this past year, before Texas and OU had left. But then a lot of stuff happened, including the Pac-12 starting to kind of crumble before our eyes last offseason, and the Big 12 took full advantage. They added Colorado, Utah, Arizona, and Arizona State to the new Big 12 going into next year. An absolutely huge decision for Brett Yormark and that group. I think if you were to ask me who has handled this conference realignment stuff as incredibly as anyone in college football, Brett Yormark would be my answer, because there were a lot of college football fans, there were a lot of Big 12 fans in particular that did not like Texas and Oklahoma. I don't think that needs to be told to people, but there are a lot of people that wanted them out as soon as possible. And Brett Yormark made that happen and struck up a deal with them, got them out of the conference, which I think works for both sides. I don't think anyone is upset about that at Texas and Oklahoma. I don't think anyone's upset about that in Lubbock, Texas by any means. So adding Colorado, Utah, Arizona, and Arizona State, they might not be Texas and Oklahoma. In fact, they're definitely not Texas and Oklahoma. But at the end of the day, they're all very good products. Utah plays good football week in and week out, year in, year out. Colorado is one of the emerging brands. Arizona played incredible football last year and is trying to build off that. And Arizona State is doing awesome things under Kenny Dillingham. It's taking a little bit of time to kind of build out his vision there, but I think he's going to get there fairly soon, because he's just a very talented guy and has a lot of passion for the game. So big fan of him. The Big Ten also took part in the mass exodus of the Pac-12. They snagged up Oregon, Washington, UCLA, and USC. So kind of the big dogs. They took the big names in the Pac-12 for sure. Oregon is the team that everyone has their eye on in the first year of the Big Ten, because in my eyes, they're a top 4 team in the country and a top 2 team in that conference. So they should be right in the mix for everything. I think Washington's in somewhat of a rebuilding year. UCLA breaking in a new head coach, and USC breaking in a new philosophy entirely. So a lot of changes going on at the other 3, but Oregon is the team that the Big 10 teams, will have to definitely worry about a little bit more than the others going into this year. And then we had a couple of stragglers at the end of the Pac-12 process, was Stanford and Cal. They found their way to the ACC, so they went as far as possible away from the Pac-12, and SMU is actually joining them from Dallas. There was a lot of speculation that they might join the Big 12, but Big 12 never seemed very interested. They already have TCU in the Fort Worth, Dallas area, so maybe that factored in, but SMU has found its way to the ACC and might not be a long-term home, but we'll find out all of that as we go along on this. So the Pac-12 became the Pac-2 very quickly. They will play Mountain West Conference opponents this year, Oregon State and Washington State. That is, so still a ton to like about all of these conferences, right? It's just a little bit different. They're a little bit bigger. They're a little bit more all over the place. Some of the games that look like out of conference will be conference games this year. So just wanted to give you a little breakdown of all of the changes that are happening there, because it's been a lot of them and they're all coming into fruition this year, and it's a little confusing at times. So just wanted to keep you all updated there. I think the ACC will be the next conference that will have a big turnover as the Florida State and ACC battle, if you will, kind of starts to come to an end. But we will update you that as we get there. For 2024, that is where we're sitting with all the conference realignment. But also, this offseason gave us a ton of coaching changes. There were not a lot of people that thought we were going to be in the position we are right now with all of the changes that have been bouncing around every which way, but it all started with Nick Saban retiring. He was the person that kind of set off a lot of dominoes around college football, and it started with Kalen DeBoer coming from Washington to Alabama. Obviously, Washington coming off a national title year was not an easy decision for Kalen DeBoer, but it's Alabama, so you got to take the chance, and Bet on yourself in that one. Washington replaced DeBoer with Jed Fish from Arizona. And then Arizona replaced Jed Fish with San Jose State's Brett Brennan. All very, very good hires, in my opinion. Brett Brennan, I am a little bit more skeptical of, just because coming up from the San Jose State level to the Arizona level is a totally different ball game. But he has coached in the Pac-12 before, so I expect him to be off and running. And with Noah Fafita there, you can accomplish a lot of things. So that will definitely be an interesting thing to watch. A couple of high-profile guys that took over for huge names in this game is Jim Harbaugh headed on to the NFL after flirting with it for the last couple of years. He is now the head coach of the LA Chargers, the team that he used to play for. Well, San Diego Chargers, who he played for, but still the same franchise. And Sharon Moore has decided they have decided that Sharon Moore is their new head coach. This was a no-brainer, was a interim coach for 4 years in 2023, so makes total sense. Someone that they all trust in that building, that understands what Michigan football is all about. So I don't think this one took very long for anyone at Michigan to make that decision. And then finally, Mike Elko is the new head coach over in College Station at Texas A&M. He takes over from Duke. He was the DC under Jimbo Fisher for a couple of years before taking the Duke job. And Jimbo Fisher is retired, it seems, kind of just hanging out. Maybe we'll be back in the game at some point, but if I were him, I would live out the best job in the world, which is a fired college football coach, because the checks keep rolling and you get to sit and fish all day. So I wouldn't necessarily blame him if he decided to clock out and permanently clock out. If I was Jimbo Fisher, I'd do the same thing. But that's about the big coaching changes. There were a ton more, but for right now, those are the ones that will really impact the college football space in 2024. But now let's get into the playoff, because there's a ton of stuff happening, especially this week. It feels like there have been talks that if a deal is not struck by this week, we might have a lot of things happen that I don't think anyone wants to see happen, including possibly the SEC and the Big Ten deciding to take their ball and play elsewhere, which is something we do not want to see. Of course, it's not something that I don't think any of us are big fans of, but it's something that could definitely happen. There are so many different things happening around college football and these playoff discussions that it feels like the SEC and the Big Ten kind of want to, as it were, take their ball and play elsewhere, stealing that a little bit from Josh Pate there. But it makes sense that they want to do that, I suppose, but they're doing everything they can to keep them intact. It'll be interesting to see how this week plays out. Right now, they're at 14 teams. They've had tons of auto bids at one point, and then no auto bids at one point that we talked about yesterday. I think 16 teams has been thrown out there, so we don't really know what the future holds with the playoff, but we know what the playoff holds for 2024. And that is a 12-team playoff with a 5+7 format, which essentially just means 5 auto bids from the 4 power conferences likely, and then one group of 5 champion. There is some, leeway there. Obviously, it's the top 5 ranked conference champions, but those tend to be the top 5 ranked conference champions. So those will likely be the teams that will get the bids there. And then the 7 at-large bids are totally up in the air. The SEC and the Big Ten could dominate those. It could be kind of an evenly split. It'll be interesting to see how the playoff committee kind of deals with the, we know the SEC and the Big Ten are bigger conferences and are more competitive in a lot of ways. So it'll be interesting to see how they weight that compared to an ACC team that's 10-2 compared to a SEC team that's 8-4 or something like that. So it'll be interesting to see how all of that comes to fruition. But for right now, it's a 12-team playoff. A lot is going to change in the next 48 hours to 72 hours. But for right now, I just wanted to get everyone an idea of what's going on with the playoff, because there are a lot of headlines going around that I'm sure are confusing a number of people. But let's jump into some rule changes and some transfers real quick. Rule changes, it looks like helmet comms are coming into college football. I love this decision. I think a lot of people are in favor of this. Offensive play callers, especially, even though they did not want to stop at where they did. Currently, the rule has one person on either side of the ball at any given time, so one offense, one defense for either team will communicate with a coach up until 15 seconds left on the play clock. There were tons of coaches that really, really wanted this to have multiple people with mics in their helmets, multiple, whether it's wide receivers or running backs or whatever. And then they also wanted it to go all the way up till 0, because apparently that's what happened in the bowl games. And there were a lot of coaches, especially offensive coaches, saying it made it so easy. There was ability to just kind of, as Josh Pate put it, play a video game in front of his eyes, play a video game in real time, because when you can communicate all the way up to the snap, there is a lot of ability for the coaches in that scenario. But right now it's only 15 seconds left on the play clock. Tablets will also be on the sidelines, so I'm in favor of both of those rules. I think it makes a ton of sense. There is also going to probably be a 2-minute warning. Is expected to make its way to college football this year. I don't necessarily love this one, but I felt like this was something that was always going to happen. Commercials are a big draw for these media companies, so this was not necessarily a big surprise to me, but not necessarily the biggest fan of that one. But let's jump into some big-time transfers. There are a million big-time transfers, but I have a couple here that just to get you an idea of where the big names are coming into this year. DJ Uiagalelei kind of kicks us off here, coming from Oregon State. As the Pac-12 kind of crumbled around him after his 1 year there, he decided to make his way down to Tallahassee. So he is the he is the quarterback for Florida State. He is the guy that will be calling the shots under center. So a huge addition for Florida State with Jordan Travis going out the door. I think both these guys are cut from the same cloth, and I really like the fit with him and Alex Atkins, the OC there. So I love that one. I think Cam Ward going to Miami from Washington State, another casualty of the Pac-12 crumble, but he has found his way to Miami, to Florida and down to Miami. So he has kind of joined DJ Uiagalelei in their travels down to the Sunshine State, and I think Cam Ward is going to be an incredible piece for this Miami team. They were missing elite, consistent quarterback play a year ago. Tyler Van Dyke struggled big time in a lot of the games that were close, including that Tech game that we have talked about a couple of different times that got away from them inexplicably at the end. But moving on, we have a couple of guys going to Ohio State that are huge difference makers on either side of the ball. Caleb Downs, I've said a million times now, I think he is the best player in college football. He is heading to Ohio State from Alabama. And then Quinshon Judkins, another SEC star from Ole Miss, is heading up to Ohio State to be a running back right next to TreVeyon Henderson. An elite duo. Maybe we'll do running back duos in the next Top 10 Tuesday, but we'll get to that next week. Texas added Isaiah Bond on the outside. They obviously needed a ton of replacements for pass catchers with Xavier Worthy, A.D. Mitchell, and Jordan Whittington walking out the door, and getting Isaiah Bond is absolutely huge for Texas. As long as him and Quinn Ewers can get on the same page, I think they could be an absolutely lethal duo this upcoming year. And then Oregon absolutely cleaned up in the portal. They have 4 guys here that are just absolute game changers. And let's start with Jabbar Muhammad, because he is the only defensive guy in this group. He is a huge shutdown corner that was at Washington a year ago. I tend to believe that he could have gone to the draft and been among the top corners in the draft, but decided to come back to school, is going to Oregon, which I'm sure some Husky fans are not too excited about, but his decision to make. They also added Jamari Caldwell on the defensive side of the ball, who is an absolute beast at defensive line coming from Houston. And then the offense just exploded. In the quarterback room especially, Dillon Gabriel and Dante Moore, both quarterbacks that were starting a year ago, both quarterbacks that are very talented. It's incredible that they were able to get them both in a room, but Dillon Gabriel will be there for 1 year, and then Dante Moore will likely take over, and I think Oregon is in for a great couple of years of quarterback play, I'll put it that way. And then Evan Stewart, adding that wide receiver from Texas A&M, is as big of a pickup as they possibly could have gotten. Him next to Tez Johnson is a lethal duo, and I cannot wait to see what they can do together on the field, especially with a facilitator like Dylan Gabriel under center. And then some other guys. We had Walter Nolan make his way from A&M like Evan Stewart, but he made his way to Ole Miss. He is a remarkable defensive lineman, probably one of the best, if not the best in the country of interior defensive linemen, is an absolute game wrecker, and could take Ole Miss to the next level, because a lot of what they have been missing is that interior trench help that Walter Nolan should bring in droves. So it'll be very interesting to see his effect on the team, and if he can kind of be the missing piece to get Ole Miss over the hump in the SEC. And then let's talk about offensive linemen. Caden Green making his way from Oklahoma to Missouri. He was a remarkable freshman last year for Oklahoma, was incredible on that left tackle side, and Missouri is incredibly happy to have his services. And Oklahoma fans were not so happy to see him leave. There were some contentious conversations, to say the least, between Missouri and Oklahoma fans during that time, but Caden Green has a new home in Columbia, Missouri, and it'll be very interesting to see what he can do. I think he's going to start. I know he's going to start right away. I shouldn't say I think. And with him protecting Brady Cook, they absolutely need him to perform to the highest level, and he's a guy that can play as good as anyone in the country. So very excited to see what he can do. And then Trevor Etienne, brother of Travis Etienne, the incredible Clemson running back, has made his way from Florida to Georgia, which is something that I really didn't think I would see very often, but here we are. There is a guy going from one rival to another, and it'll be very interesting to see what he can do at Georgia, because they were kind of thin at running back there for a time. Branson Robinson had an injury that they're very excited about that kid, and he's going to be very talented, but they needed another dude, and getting Trevor Etienne in that room was absolutely huge, so I think he's going to be one of the biggest impact transfers in the entire country this year, and possibly even a Doak Walker on his way. But tons of incredible guys across the country, tons of changes across the country, and they're not stopping anytime soon. This week is going to be wild around the playoff and possibly what the SEC and the Big Ten's future look like. But for right now, I wanted to get everyone caught up before everything goes crazy over the next couple of weeks. So those are all the updates that I have for the time being. We're going to take another short break here, and when we come back, we're going to talk recruiting again. We did the 2025 offensive side of the ball yesterday. We're going to jump into defense, some incredible guys in this class, including Elijah Griffin, who's kind of setting the pace for everyone else in this group. But stick with us, and we will be right back.
For the best and latest podcasts available anywhere, go to the podcast app on your cell phone and type in GSMC to access free content-rich podcasts on health and wellness, book reviews, sports, entertainment, relationships, social media, movies, technology, finance, and even weird news. Subscribe and download the GSMC Podcast Network's family of shows, available everywhere podcasts are found.
Alrighty, welcome back everyone. We just talked about some of the changes coming to college football just to get you updated before all the new changes happen. It feels like this week and the following weeks are going to be quite the news storm in college football, whether that's playoff changes or conference changes or conferences going off and being their own entity. There are tons of things that could be happening over the next couple of weeks, so wanted to take a second and get everyone updated of where we sit right this second. But now it's time to talk to some recruiting. The 2025 cycle, as we talked about yesterday on the offensive side of the ball, is full of just incredible players, and that is no different on the defense. But before we jump into the defense, I do want to update a little thing from the offensive side yesterday. DeCorian Moore, we talked about yesterday, a remarkable athlete that's the number one wide receiver in the country, currently committed to LSU. He has narrowed down his teams to 4 teams that he is going to be communicating with going forward in his recruitment. Those teams are Texas, Oregon, Ohio State, and obviously LSU, the team that he's committed to. this was something that I touched on, that these teams could be the teams to watch, but he has made it official that those are the only teams you need to watch, it seems, for Decoria Moore going forward. So, very interesting development there. But let's jump into some of the defensive guys, because there are a lot of remarkable players in this group, and if you can imagine it, Georgia is off to a great start recruiting defensive talent, and it starts with the interior defensive line. Top two guys seem to be heading to Athens, Georgia. Elijah Griffin from Savannah has a crystal ball to the Bulldogs, and Justice Turney from Manchester, Georgia, is committed to Georgia. So a lot of great things happening for the Bulldogs in the interior defensive line. Was a position of worry last year, so back to recruiting at the highest possible level at that position can only help Kirby Smart and his staff going forward to get that identity back on the interior of that defensive line. Two other guys in the top 10 that are committed are Isaiah Campbell and Amari Adams. They are both making their way up to Clemson, South Carolina in the fall, it looks like. Both incredibly talented, number 5 and 7 in the country, and they're going to be absolute game wreckers for Clemson, who, again, another team that has absolutely dominated the interior defensive line, whether it was Brian Brzee or Tyler Davis coming out this year. Just remarkable athletes coming through Clemson, and they just keep getting richer in that position. A couple other top 10 guys to keep your eye on. Auburn has Malik Audrey, who had a very interesting thing that I came across yesterday. I was using 24/7 for all of this. Usually they're composite rankings, but Malik Autry is number 4 according to just 24/7, but then all the way down at 22 when you factor in the entire composite. So it'll be interesting to see, was 24/7 right about him? Was Rivals? Was ESPN? Was On3? Who knows? But it'll be very interesting to see who he is at the next level. He is currently committed to Auburn, so a huge pickup for them if 24/7 is right. A huge pickup regardless, but obviously having the number 4 guy in the country is a little bit different than number 22. But other guys in the top 10 that are committed, this is back to composite rankings. Florida at number 9 overall, they have Jalen Wiggins committed, and then Texas has a commitment from Lance Jackson, who is sitting at number 8 in the interior defensive lineman class. A ton of really, really talented guys, a ton of guys that are not committed and don't have any crystal balls, so a ton to watch at that position, but that is the early idea of where the top guys are going. And let's jump over to edge. And can you guess who has the number 1 edge rusher in this class? It is none other than the Florida State Seminoles, and it makes total sense with someone like Jared Verse coming out the last couple of years and being the player he was. I can't argue with that decision at all. So makes total sense there. Clemson, Ohio State, and Auburn all have top 10 guys committed at that position. A ton of uncommitted talent. UGA, Bama, every team in college football will be fighting over, but for right now, there are some teams that are setting the pace, and obviously it's Florida State, Clemson, Ohio State, and Auburn. All having commitments from top 10 edge rushers at this time is huge, just because if you can't rush the passer, you're going to have a very, very hard time. Obviously, for this D-line class, the interior defensive line is a little bit stronger than the edge rushers, but plenty of talent on either side, so cannot wait to see what all of these guys do at the next level and what they do throughout the rest of their recruitment, because as we know, nothing is set in stone right now. But let's jump over to linebacker here. The top linebacker in the country, Jonah Williams out of Galveston, Texas, is crystal balled to Oklahoma. Makes total sense. Brent Venables has been just incredible at developing linebacker talent for as long as I can remember. So makes total sense that he would want to join him there. There will be plenty of challengers for this kid because he is an absolute game changer. But right now, Oklahoma seems to be in the driver's seat for that one. Only one other top 10 guy is committed, and it's number 10, Jaden Perloit, who is committed to UGA. UGA just rakes in linebackers. There's no two ways about that. Having guys like Roquan Smith and even a guy right now in CJ Allen, gives you a little bit of a leg up in recruiting, I won't lie. And then Texas, Florida State, and Florida all have crystal balls to top 10 guys. Bama and Florida State are fighting over the number 3 guy in the country at this position, Daryl Johnson. So tons to still watch at this position, tons to keep track of. And as we know, if you have an elite inside linebacker and an elite middle linebacker to kind of set the pace and be the communicator with helmet comms coming into play, it makes all the difference for your defense and for your team. But let's go to the back end of the defense, why don't we? Because this is where Ohio State has started to flex their muscles a little bit in the recruiting game, at least early on. They have the top two corners in the class, Devin Sanchez and Naheem Offord, committed to Ohio State with a crystal ball from number 4 overall, Dorian Brew. I've heard some murmurs of Texas possibly making a push for Dorian Brew over recent weeks, but we'll see. And just for fun, they also have the number 8 cornerback, Blake Woodby, committed to them. So Tim Walton is doing just incredible work as a recruiter. That's why he is the number 1 recruiter in the country, according to 24/7 right now. And then just a mini shout out to Purdue for getting a top 10 guy at corner in Terrion Grant. If they can keep him committed, that is a huge pickup for the Boilermakers. And then LSU has a top 10 guy, and Jabori Antoine, I apologize if I butchered that name, but all very talented guys. But right now, it's Ohio State and everyone else at the cornerback position for sure. And safety is really no different. The top guy, Trey McNutt, is undecided and has no crystal balls currently on the 24/7 website, but is from Cleveland, is from like Shaker Heights high school area, so would not be surprised if Ohio State had all of the claim here. Will be definitely heard from in that recruitment, but it'll be interesting to see where he ends up. Ohio State is the leader in the clubhouse for the number 2 guy, though, Fahim Deline, a very, very talented guy that a ton of teams are pushing for, including some of the teams from his hometown state in Texas, but still a guy that seems to be trending towards Ohio State, and Tim Walton just keeps doing his thing, which is just remarkable. But Notre Dame and UCF actually have top 10 commits. Ivan Taylor for Notre Dame and Kendarius Riddick committed to UCF right now. Obviously, UCF is going to have to fight tooth and nail to keep that guy there, but they've done a really good job recruiting since Gus Malzahn has taken over, so I would not be surprised if he actually ended up making his way down to Orlando. Tons of guys at the safety position are totally wide open. There are only 2 of the top 13 committed right now, and only 3 of the top 26 guys committed. So there is a ton of open doors for teams to get in. Obviously, Trey McNutt is where all of this starts. He's the number 1 guy, the guy that will be getting calls from everywhere in the country to try to get his services, and I'm sure Ohio State will be in that group, but if they can get Fahim Deline, maybe they will back off Trey McNutt a little bit, and we'll see what happens there. But tons to keep track of in this defensive class. Elijah Griffin is an absolute game changer. Jonah Williams at linebacker is just remarkable in every sense of the word. And then you have guys like Devin Sanchez at corner, who, when he was a sophomore in high school, was a starter for one of the best teams in the country in North Shore and is an absolute beast. So a lot to like about this defensive class. So many guys that still have decisions to make, and we will definitely keep you posted on all of the happenings there. But it's always good to know the names while we go into these crazy point of time in recruiting that is coming up. But for now, we're going to take our final break, and when we come back, we're going to do a Top 10 Tuesday. Today, we're going to go into head coaches. As I see it, the top 10, I've seen a lot of people do this, and I haven't seen one that is similar to another. So I'm sure mine will be a little bit different than everyone else's, but feel free to drop yours in the comments or tell me that I am wrong, tell me I'm stupid. I don't really care. It's all fair game in Top 10 Tuesday. So stick around, and we will be right back with that. Alrighty, welcome back everyone. We just talked about some of the craziness happening in the 2025 recruiting cycle, getting you updated with all of the guys you should know, all of the names that you should know going into what's going to be probably the craziest time for recruiting for coaches, which is the summertime. But now it's time for another Top 10 Tuesday. We have a great one for you today. Coaches, which a lot of people have a lot of different opinions on. I've seen a ton of people have Lance Leipold all the way up at number 3 in the country. I've seen people have him not in the top 10. So a lot of differing opinions, but I have mine. So let's jump right in. Why don't we? There is a ton to like about this group of coaches. There is so many incredible coaches across the entire country. And the only one I was absolutely confident in when putting it in is Kirby Smart is the number 1 coach in the country. I don't think anyone is pushing back on that anymore. Since Saban retired, he feels like he's been the consensus number 1. Back-to-back titles before this year, and if they had 1 or 2 plays back in that Alabama game, I think they would have been right in the thick for another title and possibly a three-peat, which would have been just incredible. He's also an incredible recruiter, as we know, one of the best defensive minds in all of the game, and the list can go on and on with him. He's a remarkable relationship builder, so Kirby is one of those guys that is doing pretty much everything perfectly, which is just incredible to watch. He has kind of recreated that Bama machine that everyone has talked about over the last decade or so in this sport, and has emulated it nearly perfectly at UGA with his own little ers and ahs thrown in there. But he's the first person I've seen in my lifetime that I feel can match what Nick Saban did, and it's going to be incredibly hard. I'm not saying he's going to be close to do it, next year or anything like that, but he is someone that, with the age that he is currently at, with the passion that he coaches with, and with the teams that he puts out on a year-by-year basis, he is someone that, against all odds, could possibly catch Nick Saban in all of this. But number 2 is Dabo Swinney. I know there are a lot of people that think he should be way down on this list. I know there are a lot of Dabo Swinney haters. But at the end of the day, this is a 2-time national championship coach. There are only 3 guys in all of college football that have won national championships as a head coach: Kirby Smart, Dabo Swinney, and Mac Brown. So all of those guys deserve a ton of respect, but the top 2 guys here won it twice, and a lot of people will tell you it's because he had Deshaun Watson and Trevor Lawrence, 2 just remarkable quarterbacks in college football history. But at the end of the day, you got to get them on campus, and you have to develop them, and you have to put them in the right positions, and Dabo Swinney was a huge part of all of that. I think one of the big knocks on Dabo Swinney, and the one thing that I really worry about with him going forward, is he could definitely be falling down this list in the next couple of years if he doesn't change his ways in recruiting. I think he has to play a bigger part in the portal. Clemson is a huge program right now. It has, a lot of the kids that you were currently recruiting saw you win 2 championships during the Nick Saban terror that ran over college football. So he's got to take advantage of it. And if he doesn't, I think it could come at the detriment of Clemson football, but we'll see what happens. He is kind of held steadfast in his belief, and we'll see if it comes to fruition for him. But just to give you an idea of just how incredible of a coach he really is, the last 2 seasons they've won 10 games and 9 games, and it's been an abject failure. I think everyone would say that. A ton of people have said that as reasons why he's not good anymore, but it's remarkable any time that your team can win double-digit games and your fan base is not happy. So that gives you an idea of how high I think of Dabo Swinney and how high on this list he deserves to be. So let's keep going here. I got Brian Kelly at number 3, and I know there are a lot of people, especially recently it seems, trying to discount the coach he is because he hasn't won a national title. And as I just said, there are only 3 guys in the game right now that have. So it's really hard to win a national title is what I'm trying to say. But it is incredibly hard as well to field a team every single year that is going to win 9, 10 games. Is going to be at least in the conversation at the end of the year. And Brian Kelly has done that pretty much everywhere he goes. Notre Dame obviously played for a national title while there in 2012. Did a good day for Alabama and the Crimson Tide that day, but getting there was a remarkable achievement and something that not a lot of coaches have been able to pull off. So he's someone that I have a ton of respect for. I think, honestly, there were some mechanisms at Notre Dame that were kind of holding him back a little bit. And I think now that he's at LSU, all the floodgates are open for him to do and be whoever he wants. So I think he is doing an incredible job there. He's recruiting at a really high level. And the staff he's putting together is just remarkable, which is something that separates the good coaches from the elite coaches. Is can you surround yourself with people that are just as remarkable as you? And he's done an incredible job, especially this offseason, in doing that. So huge fan of Brian Kelly. And then Ryan Day, I have at the 4 position. Another guy that is coached for a national title, but came up on the short end that day. He is someone that people will try to convince you he's something he isn't. People will try to tell you he hasn't won anything, so he's not talented or he's not a good coach. He's one of the best offensive minds in all of the sport. He is a remarkable recruiter. He obviously does a great job with all of the quarterbacks that come in that room. Some have hit at different levels. Obviously, Kyle McCord, not necessarily the level you wanted in Columbus, but at the end of the day, this guy knows what he's doing. And he made a huge decision in giving up play calling and handing it over to Chip Kelly, who's one of the best offensive minds in all of football. So he's made a lot of really tough decisions that some other coaches just wouldn't make. And it's really interesting to see all of this unfold. It'll be fascinating to see if he can play that GM role with, that new role that he's kind of taken on. And giving up play calling duties is a totally different skill set. So it will be interesting to see if he can kind of climb up this list because of that decision, or maybe it's too much for him and he slowly starts to fall down this list. But we'll see as time goes on. Number 5, I have Kalen DeBoer. He is someone that I have gained a crazy amount of respect for crazy fast because he is one of the best football minds we have in the game. I think he is someone that immediately makes a football team better. I think he could walk into a room with any group of athletes and put together a game plan that makes sense because he is someone that understands the game at such a high level. And obviously he's in a position now where you're taking over for a guy that knew more football than probably anyone on planet Earth in Nick Saban. But at the end of the day, this is a very, very good head coach. The staff he's put together at Bama is really solid, even though there were some bumps in the road with Ryan Grubb moving on to the NFL along with Scott Huff, but he's filled those gaps as needed. So it's been a tough couple of months, I would say, with all of the changes going on around Alabama, but when it comes to the football field, there are very few people that outdo Kalen DeBoer. So he's in my 5 position. And then let's get into the back half of this. Lincoln Riley is in my 6th position. I still think he's a fantastic head coach. You don't stumble onto 4 trips in a row to the playoff by accident. I promise you that. So he's obviously an incredible offensive mind, does a remarkable job with the quarterbacks that go through there, has won a ton of Heisman with the quarterbacks that he has had. And much like Ryan Day, he's someone that had to admit where a mistake was made, where his identity, the way that he was playing and going about business pretty much on a day-to-day basis was just not good enough. So that change will be probably the decider for the rest of his career. If he can pull it off, I think he can win multiple national titles. If he can't pull it off, it might be a little bit tougher of sledding for Lincoln Riley towards the end of his career here. But well, we're not even remotely towards the end of his career, but we'll see how that turnaround works. But as of right now, he's still among the top coaches in the country. Then let's get into Steve Sarkisian, a newer name on the block in terms of being among this group of people, but coming off a remarkable year, his best year as a head coach by a fairly comfortable margin. Obviously, a great offensive mind, does great things with his quarterbacks. Quinn Ewers has been getting better every single year. I think this upcoming year is going to be huge for Texas, just to solidify that they are, quote-unquote back. They are in the conversation year over year. It wasn't just a blip on the radar last year where you had a lot of talent, you can emulate it and you can reload and keep going. So it'll be interesting to see what he can do this year. But I think his best trait has just been program building. He's been incredible at bringing in all of the talent that they need. I mean, he started with not enough offensive linemen to have a spring game, and now he has one of the best rooms in the country at offensive linemen. The QB room has done entire 180 flips since he got there, and it started with Quinn Ewers coming over. And then the staff he's built has been just remarkable. So he's someone that has a very clear vision, obviously, and has been executing it incredibly well. So that's why he's in my 7th spot, followed by another guy that had a remarkable year this year, Mike Norvell. Just incredible stuff he's doing at Florida State. He has built over the last couple of years, and Florida State fans have had to be a little bit patient, but last year was quite the payoff with a 13-0 record before a lot of stuff didn't go your way. But we won't worry about that right now. I think my only worry for Mike Norvell, and I think he's capable of pulling this off year over year, but it is a worry where you're bringing in a lot of guys from the portal, and obviously a lot of teams are doing that, but the reliance on the portal can be a worry if you don't execute that correctly every single year. So there is a little bit of boom or bust potential in these Florida State teams, but if he can deliver this year, I think I will no longer worry about however many transfer portal players he wants to bring in. More than fine with me, because he can obviously make it work year over year. And then a couple of guys here at the end that were in the Pac-12 last year now are on the move, but Kyle Whittingham over at Utah, kind of like Brian Kelly, just a model of consistency. Will always field a team that is going to give teams fits, has had a number of incredible seasons, including prior to this year going to back-to-back Pac-12 championships. So just a remarkable developer of talent, a remarkable coach, obviously has great relationships with his kids, and has been just as consistent as you can possibly be at a place like Utah. So I have huge respect for Kyle Whittingham. I think he's someone that if he's not in your top 10, I totally disagree right away. But we'll round things out here with Dan Lanning. A little bit earlier on in his head coaching career, and I understand if you'd want to put some of the honorable mentions like Lance Leipold, Chris Kleinman, or Mark Stoops, or even Jeff Brom above him. But the way I look at it is Dan Lanning is, I don't want to say the new Kirby Smart because that's putting way too much on him, but he is pulling that same type of attitude when taking over Oregon. He is taking everything that he learned at UGA, from structure to practice to everything that he can think of, and he has taken it over to Oregon. He is creating an SEC program as far away from SEC country as possible, and it's going to be a very interesting thing to watch. I think he's someone that can develop talent really well, is a remarkable defensive mind, and he's, like Sark, has a very clear vision, it seems, and I think executing that vision, he's done a great job over the first couple of years, but year 3 and year 4, as we know, are kind of the deciding years for coaches. So we'll see if he can kind of continue on that path that he's been on in the past couple of years. And then obviously some of the honorable mentions, Lance Leipold, Chris Kleinman, Mark Stoops, Jeff Brom, all those guys just do incredible things with not nearly as much talent as other people, always win a ton of games, always win more games than you're expecting them to win. So huge amount of respect for those guys. But those are my top 10. Let me know in the comments if you have any objections to this. I'm sure there are some people that are totally disagree with this, but I'm happy to interact with all of you if you have any different opinions. But that will do it for this edition of the GSMC College Football Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Sports Network. Your support means a ton to us, so please leave a positive review and subscribe to the show. It means a ton to us. And also follow us on Facebook, Twitter, or X, TikTok, Instagram, all of the social pages for all the content and updates you could possibly want across pretty much every sport you could possibly think of. We have all awesome people here doing incredible work across every single sport, so definitely follow on all of the pages there. But thank you once again for listening, and I will see you guys tomorrow.